Wizard of the Crow by Ngugi wa Thiongo. In the spirit of the dead, the living and the unborn, empty your ears of all impurities, O listener, so that you may hear my story. Book 1, Power Demons. There were many theories about the strange illness of the second ruler of the Free Republic of Aburiria, but the most frequent on people's lips were 5. The illness, so claimed the first, was born of anger that once welled up deep inside him, and he was so conscious of the danger it posed to his well-being that he tried all he could to rid himself of it by belching after every meal, sometimes counting from 1 to 10, and other times chanting, "Kakekikoku." Why these particular syllables, nobody could tell. Still, they considered that the ruler had a point. Just as offensive gases of the constipated need to be expelled, thus easing the burden on the tummy, anger in a person also needs a way out to ease the burden on the heart. This ruler's anger, however, would not go away, and it continued simmering inside till it consumed his heart. This is believed to be the source of the Aburirian saying that ire is more corrosive than fire, for it once eroded the soul of a ruler. But when did this anger take root? When snakes first appeared on the national scene? When water in the bowels of the earth turned bitter? Or when he visited America and failed to land an interview with Global Network News on its famous program, Meet the Global Mighty? It is said that when he was told that he could not be granted even a minute on the air, he could hardly believe his ears, or even understand what they were talking about, knowing that in his country he was always on TV, his every moment, eating, shitting, sneezing, or blowing his nose, captured on camera. Even his yawns were news because, whether triggered by boredom, fatigue, hunger, or thirst, they were often followed by some national drama. His enemies were lashed in the public square with a shambok, whole villages were blown to bits, or people were pierced to death by bows and arrows, their carcasses left in the open as food for hyenas and vultures. It is said that he was especially skillful in creating and nursing conflicts among Aburirian families, for scenes of sorrow were what assuaged him and made him sleep soundly. But nothing, it seemed, would now temper his anger. Could anger, however deeply felt, cause a mystery illness that defied all logic and medical expertise? The second theory was that the illness was a curse from the cry of a wronged he-goat. It is said that some elders, deeply troubled by the sight of blood flooding the land, decided to treat this evil as they had epidemics that threatened the survival of the community in the olden days. But instead of burying the evil inside the belly of a beast by inserting flies, standing for the epidemic, into its anus, they would insert the ruler's hair, standing for the evil, into the belly of a he-goat through its mouth. The evil-carrying goat, standing for the ruler, would then become an outcast in the land, to be driven out of any region where its cry announced its evil presence. Led by a medicine man, they mixed the hair, obtained secretly from the ruler's barber, with grass, salt, and magic potions, and gave it to the goat to swallow. Needle and thread in hand, the medicine man started sewing the 7 orifices of the body, beginning with the anus. The struggling he-goat gave out a blood-curdling cry, and before the medicine man could seal its mouth, it escaped. It is said that it cried grief across the land until the ruler heard the cry, and learning about the curse, which he imagined to be a call for a coup, sent soldiers to hunt down the he-goat and all involved. Rumor has it that the goat the barber, the medicine man, the elders, and even the soldiers were given over to the crocodiles of the Red River to ensure eternal silence about the curse. And it was to mark this day of deliverance that the ruler had the picture of the Red River added to Buri notes, the only picture besides his own, to honor the Aburiran currency. Still, he worried about the fact that the goat had appeared, and he secretly consulted an oracle in a nearby country who assured him that only a bearded spirit could seriously threaten his rule. Though he read this as meaning that no human could overthrow him, for since they had no bodily form, spirits could never grow beards, he became sensitive to beards, and then decreed what came to be known as the law of the beard, that all goats and humans must have their beards shaved off. There are some who dispute the story of the bearded he-goat, and even argue that the law of the beard applied only to soldiers, policemen, civil servants, and politicians, and that the headsmen shaved their he-goats out of their own volition, shaving goats' beards then being the fashion among Aburiran headsmen. The skeptics wondered, what has the cry of a he-goat, whose anus, ears, and nose being sealed, have anything to do with the strange illness that befell the ruler? Others now came up with a third theory, which said that, since nothing lasts forever, the illness had something to do with the aging of his rule. He had sat on the throne so long that even he could not remember when his reign began. His rule had no beginning and no end, and judging from the facts, one may well believe the claim. Children had been born, and had given birth to others, and those to others, and those to others, and so on, and his rule had survived all the generations. So that when some people heard that before him there had been a first ruler, preceded by a succession of governors and sultans all the way from the eras of the Arabs, the Turks, the Italians, and to that of the British, they would simply shake their heads in disbelief, saying, no, those are just the tales of a daydreamer. Aburiria had never had and could never have another ruler, because had not this man's reign begun before the world began, and would end only after the world has ended? Although even that surmise was shot through with doubt, for how can the world come to an end? The fourth theory asserted that his illness had its origins in all the tears unshed that Rachel, his legal wife, had locked up inside her soul after her fall from his grace. The ruler and his wife had fallen out one day when Rachel asked questions about the schoolgirls who rumors claimed were often invited to the state house to make his bed, where he, like the aging white man of the popular saying, fed on spring chicken. Of course, the ruler would never admit to aging, but he had no problems with the white man comparison, and so he amended the proverb to say that a white man renews his youth with spring chicken. Imagine how he must have felt when Rachel's attempt to deny him his fountains of youth. How indiscreet and indecorous of her to ask the unaskable. Since when could a male, let alone a ruler, be denied the right to feel his way around women's thighs, whether other men's wives or schoolgirls? What figure of a ruler would he cut were he to renounce his right to husband all women in the land, in the manner of the lords of old Europe, who had the right to every bride-to-be? Rachel thought she was being reasonable. "I know that you take the title of father of the nation seriously," she told him. "You know that I have not complained about all those women who make beds for you, no matter how many children you make with them. But why schoolgirls? Are they not as young as the children you have fathered? Are they not really our children? You father them today, and tomorrow you turn them into wives. Have you no concern for our tomorrow? They were dining in the State House, and to Rachel, the evening was very special because it was the first time in a long time that they were alone together. The burdens of presiding over the nation hardly ever gave them time to share meals and engage in husband and wife talk. Rachel believed in the saying that clothes maketh a woman, and that night she had taken particular care with her appearance. A white cotton dress with a V-shaped collar, short sleeves pleated at the edges, a necklace highlighting her slender neck, rings on her fingers, and dangling from her elegant ears, diamonds sparkling all about her. We can very well imagine the scene. Guiding his fork unerringly towards his lips, the ruler was about to place a morsel of chicken into his mouth, when suddenly, at Rachel's words, the fork froze in mid-air. Slowly, he lowered the fork to the plate, the piece of chicken still on it, took the napkin and wiped his lips with deliberation. Before placing the napkin on the table, he turned to his wife and asked, "Rachel, did I really hear you say that I have been forcing myself on school children, that I do not cry over our tomorrow? Have you ever heard of a ruler who cries, except me? Never mind him. And where did those daily tears of a grown man lead him? He lost his throne. Do you want me to end up as he did?" There is always a difference between a thought and its description. What the ruler had been dwelling on when lowering the fork to the table and wiping his lips with the corner of the napkin was not the fate of a ruler who wept and so lost his throne, but rather what he would have to do to make Rachel understand that he, the ruler, had power, real power, over everything, including, yes, time. He shuddered at the thought. Even before shuddering completed, he had made up his mind. Speaking with studied calm, a faint smile on his face, he told Rachel that the unfinished meal would be their last supper together, that he would go away to give her time to think about the implications of her allegations, and since she would need space to think, he would bring to pass what had been written in the scriptures. "In my Father's house are many mansions, even for sinners." He built her a house on a 7-acre plot that he surrounded with a stone wall and an electric fence. And it was while contemplating the unbreachable walls that the idea of building a building that reached, but we shall talk about that later, because the idea was given expression by one of his most faithful and loyal ministers. What was undisputedly the product of his own genius in its conception and execution was the construction of Rachel's mansion. All the clocks in the house were frozen at the second, the minute and the hour that she had raised the question of schoolgirls. The calendar pointed to the day and the year. The clocks tick-tocked, but their hands did not move. The mechanical calendar always flipped to the same date. The food provided was the same as that at the Last Supper. The clothes, the same as she had worn that night. The bedding and curtains were identical to those where she had once lived. The television and radio kept repeating the programs that were on during the Last Supper. Everything in the new mansion reproduced the exact same moment. A record player was programmed to play only one hymn. "Our Lord will come back one day, He will take us to his home above. I will then know how much he loves me whenever he comes back. And when he comes back, you, the wicked, will be left behind, mourning your wicked deeds whenever our Lord comes back." The idea of the endless repetition of this hymn pleased him so much that he had amplifiers placed at the four corners of the 7-acre plantation so that passers-by and even others would benefit from the tune and the words. Rachel would remain thus, awaiting his second coming, and on that day when he found that she had shed all the tears from all the tomorrows of all the children she had accused him of abusing, he would take her back to restart life exactly from where it had stopped. Or rather, Rachel would resume her life, which had been marking time like a cinematic frame on pause. I am your beginning and your end. "What were you before I made you my wife?" he asked, and answered himself, "A primary school teacher." "I am the past and the present you have been, and I am your tomorrow. Take it or leave it," he added as he turned his back on her. There was only one entrance to the 7-acre prison. An armed guard was stationed at the stone gate to make sure that she neither left or received visitors except officials who replenished supplies and doubled their spies, or else her children. Her children, apart from the numberless others he begot upon his bedmakers. The ruler had 4 boys with Rachel. They were not the brightest in their class, and he had taken them out of school before they had obtained their high school diplomas. He enlisted them in the army to learn on the job, where they quickly rose to the highest ranks. At the beginning of their mother's frozen present, the firstborn, Ruben Kuchera, was a 3-star general in the army. The second, Samuel Moya, a 2-star general in the Air Force. The third, Dickens Soyi, a 1-star general in the Navy. And the fourth, Richard Runyeje, an army captain. But apart from their military duties, they were all on the board of directors of several parastatals closely linked to foreign companies, particularly those involved in the exploration of oil and the mining of precious metals. They were also on several licensing boards. Their main task was to sniff out any anti-government plots in the 3 branches of the armed forces, as well as to receive bribes. The only problem was that the 4 were so partial to alcohol and drugs that it was difficult for them to keep up with whatever was happening in the armed forces or on the boards over which they sat. The ruler was rather disappointed, for he had hoped that at least one of his sons with Rachel might inherit the throne, establishing a mighty family dynasty, and so he often scolded them for their lack of ambition and appetite for power. Yet, on the days when they brought him their collections, there was the celebratory atmosphere of a family reunion. They did not view their mother's life in a 7-acre cage as a dangerous confinement, and when they were not too drunk, they would call her. Rachel could receive calls, and she could not call out. They would call her and say, "How are you?" And when they heard her say that she was fine, they took it that all was well with her, and they would quickly return to what they knew best: alcohol, drugs, and bribes. In calling her, albeit only now and then, the sons actually showed more humanity toward her than did their father, who never once visited the cage to say any word, good or bad. Despite this, Rachel was always in the ruler's mind, for he received daily reports of her moods and activities, how she spent her day, how she slept, the words she muttered to herself, everything. What he yearned to hear, however, was any news of her tears, the one sign that would unerringly point to her breakdown and desire for redemption. But he didn't. It is said by those who hold the 4th theory that Rachel aware of this insatiable desire for humiliating the already fallen, had sworn that she would never let him see her tears or hear about them, not even from her children or the numerous spies. And the more she held out, the more he needed her self-abnegation. Her tears had become the battlefield of their wills. This obsession with her tears, claimed the creators of the fourth theory, led to the ruler's strange illness. The trouble with this theory was that it relied either on rumors or whatever could be deduced from the behavior of the ruler's children. It was also the least known of the 5 theories, because it was only whispered among people who trusted one another. For who would be so foolish as to talk about this openly unless he was inviting death upon himself? There were others who to this day are ready to swear that the illness had nothing to do with the ruler's burning anger, the anguish cry of a wronged he-goat, the aging rain or Rachel's tears. And theirs was the 5th theory, that the illness was the sole work of the demons that the ruler had housed in a special chamber in the state house, who had now turned their backs on him and withdrew their protective services. It is said that the walls and ceiling of the chamber were made from the skeletons of the students, teachers, workers, and small farmers he had killed in all the regions of the country. For it was well known that he came into power with flaming swords, the bodies of his victims falling down to his left and right like banana trunks. The skulls of his most hated enemies hung on the walls, and others from the ceiling, bone sculptures, white memories of victory and defeat. The chamber was a cross between a museum and a temple, and every morning the ruler, after first bathing in the preserved blood of his enemies, would enter carrying a staff and a fly whisk, and then walk quietly about, looking at the various exhibits one by one. Then, about to leave, he would suddenly stop at the door and glance one more time at the chamber, and with mocking gestures of triumphant contempt at the dark holes and grinning teeth where once laid eyes and mouths, he would say, "What were you after? This fly whisk? This scepter? This crown?" He would pause, as if expecting an answer, and when the skulls failed to respond, he would burst out in guffaws, as if daring them to contradict what he was about to say. "I plucked out your tongues and tore your lips, to show you that a politician without a mouth is no politician at all." But there were times when it looked as if the skulls were grinning back in counter-mockery, and laughter would stop abruptly. "You bastards! It is your own greed and boundless ambition that has led you here. Did you seriously think that you had a chance to overthrow me? Let me tell you, the person who would even dare has not been born, and if he has, he will still have to change himself into a spirit and grow a beard and human hair on his feet. You did not know that," he would add, pointing at them with his staff menacingly, his mouth foaming with fury. Let me say, as the narrator, that I cannot confirm the truth or falsity of the existence of the chamber. It may turn into a mere rumor or tale from the mouth of Askari Arigaigai Gateri. But if it exists, simple logic proves that it was the ruler's morning rites in this chamber of skulls that long ago, before the ruler's fatal visit to America and any talk of his illness, had given rise to a rumor that quickly spread out throughout the country. Whenever 2 or 3 gathered together, the first question was about the rumor. "Can you believe it? Did you know that the ruler is a devil worshipper, and that he worships his lord and master, Satan, in the name of a serpent?" The rumor about devil and snake worship took root in all Aburiria, following one of the most ambitious programs for birthday celebrations in honor of a ruler ever undertaken in the country. Now, everybody in the country knew something or the other about the ruler's birthday because it was firmly set in the national calendar. The date of his birth and the manner of its celebration had been the subject of a heated debate in Parliament that went on for 7 months, 7 days, 7 hours and 7 minutes, and even the honourable members could not arrive at a consensus, mainly because nobody knew for sure the actual date of the ruler's birth. And when they failed to break the impasse, the honourable members sent a formal delegation to the very seat of power to seek wise guidance, after which they paused and passed a motion of gratitude to the ruler for helping the members to come to a solution to a problem that had completely defeated their combined knowledge and experience. The birthday celebrations would always start at the 7th hour of the 7th day of the 7th month, 7 being the ruler's sacred number. And precisely because in Aburiria, the ruler controlled how the months followed each other. January, for instance, trading places with July. He therefore had the power to declare any month in the year the 7th month, and any day within that 7th month the 7th day, and therefore the ruler's birthday. The same applied to time and any hour, depending on the wishes of the ruler. The attendance at these annual assemblies always varied, but that particular year, the stadium was almost full because the curiosity of the citizens had been aroused by a special announcement, repeated over and over in the media, that there would be a special birthday cake, which the entire country had made for the ruler, and which he might make multiply and feed the multitudes in the way that Jesus Christ once did with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The prospect of cakes for the multitude may explain the more than usual presence of the victims of kwashiorkor. The celebration started at noon, and late in the afternoon it was still going strong. The sun dried people's throats. The ruler, his ministers, and the leaders of the ruler's party, all under shade, kept cooling their tongues with cold water. The citizens without shade or water distracted themselves from the hot darts of the sun by observing and commenting on what was happening on the platform. The clothes the dignitaries wore, the way they walked, or even where each sat relative to the seat of might. Immediately behind the ruler was a man who held a pen the width of an inch water pipe in his right hand and a huge leather-bound book in his left. And since he was always writing, people assumed that he was a member of the press, although there were some who wondered why he was not at the press gallery. Besides him sat the 4 sons of the ruler, Kuchera, Moya, Soi, and Runyeje, studiously drinking from bottles labeled diet. Near the sons sat Dr. Wilfred Kapocha, the ruler's personal physician, and next to him, the only woman on the platform, who was also conspicuous by her silence. Some assumed that she was one of the ruler's daughters, but then they wondered, why was she not speaking to her brothers? Others thought she was Dr. Kapocha's wife. But why would there be silence between Dr. Kapocha and his wife, they thought. To the ruler's right sat the Minister of Foreign Affairs in a dark striped suit and a red tie with a picture of the ruler, the emblem of the ruler's party. The story goes that Marcus used to be an ordinary member of Parliament. Then one day he flew to England, where under the glare of publicity, he entered a major London hospital, not because he was ill, but because he wanted to have his eyes enlarged, to make them ferociously sharp, as he put it in Kiswahili, yawe macho kali, so that they would be able to spot the enemies of the ruler no matter how far they were in hiding. Enlarged to the size of electric bulbs, his eyes were now the most prominent feature on his face, dwarfing his nose, cheeks, and forehead. The ruler was so touched by his devotion and public expression of loyalty that he even, before the MP returned home from England, the ruler had given him the Minister of Foreign Affairs, an important cabinet post, so that Machokali would be his representative eye wherever, in whatever corner of the globe lay the ruler's interests. And so, Machokali became, and later he even forgot the name that he was given at birth. To the left of the ruler sat another cabinet minister, the minister of the state in the ruler's office, dressed in a white silk suit, a red handkerchief in his breast pocket, and of course, the party tie. He too had started as a not particularly distinguished member of parliament, and he probably would have remained thus, except that when he heard of the good fortune that had befallen Machokali, he decided to follow suit. He did not have much money, so he secretly sold his father's plot and borrowed the rest to buy himself a flight to France and a hospital bed in Paris, where he had his ears enlarged so that, as he put it, would be able to hear better and therefore be privy to the most private of conversations between husband and wife, children and their parents, students and teachers, priests and their flock, physicians and their patients, all in the service of the ruler. His eyes were small, but his ears were larger than a rabbit's, and always primed to detect danger at any time and from any direction. His devotion did not go unnoticed, and he was made Minister of the State, in charge of spying on the citizenry. The secret police machine known as M5 was now under his direction, and so Silva Sikioku he became. The success of the two erstwhile members of parliament was, ironically, the beginning of their rivalry. One considered himself the ruler's eye, and the other his ear. People at the stadium kept comparing their different expressions, particularly the movements of their eyes and ears, for it had long been known that the two were always in a mortal struggle to establish which organ was more powerful, the eye or the ear of the ruler. Machokali always saw by his eyes. May these turn against me if I am not telling the truth. Sikioku invoked his ears. May these be my witness that what I am saying is true, and in mentioning them he would tug at the earlobes. The gesture rehearsed and perfected over time gave him a slight urge in their rivalry for attention, because Machokali could never match it by tugging at his eyelids, and he was reduced to doing the second most important thing by pointing at his eyes for emphasis. Other members of parliament would have followed suit and had their bodies altered depending on what services they wanted to render to the ruler, except for what befell Benjamin Mambo. As a young man, Mambo had failed to get into the army because he was small. But the fire for a military life never died, and now with the new avenues of power opened by Machokali and Sikioku, he thought that this was his chance to realize his dream, and he agonized over the best bodily change to lend him the defense minister portfolio. He chose to have his tongue elongated so that in echoing the ruler's commands, he would reach every soldier in the country, and his threats would reach all his enemies before they could reach the Aburirian borders. He first emulated Sikioku and went to Paris, but there was some misunderstanding about the required size, and the tongue, like a dog's, now hung way beyond his lips, rendering his speech impossible. Machokali came to his aid by arranging for him to go to a clinic in Berlin where the lips were pulled and elongated to cover the tongue, but even then not completely, and the tongue protruded now just a little. But the ruler misread the significance and gave him the Minister of Information. This was not bad, and Mambo marked his elevation to a cabinet post by changing his forenames and called himself Big Ben, inspired by the clock at the British Houses of Parliament. His full name was now Big Ben Mambo. He did not forget the help of Machokali, and in the political struggle between Marcus Machokali and Silva Sikiyoko, he often took Machokali's side. The idea of a special national gift had come from Machokali, though of course he had gotten strong hints from a high above, and it was with the pride of the inventor that he signaled the military, the police and the prison brass bands to get themselves ready to strike the birthday tune. The moment had come. There was great curiosity among the crowd as Machokali, aided by the members of the birthday committee and some police officers, dramatically unfolded and held aloft a huge cloth. Shoving one another aside, people tried to position themselves to see, and they were puzzled when they saw on the cloth a huge drawing of something that looked like a building. A drawing on a white cloth for the ruler's birthday gift, they thought. Taking full advantage of the curiosity and raised expectations, Machokali first appealed to the people to calm themselves, because not only was he going to describe everything that was on that cloth, but he was going to make sure that copies of what the English call an artist's impression would be distributed to the entire country. He would in fact take that opportunity to thank the teacher who had volunteered his services to do the impression, but regretted that he could not reveal the teacher's name because the artist had forbidden him. Teaching was a noble profession, and its practitioners were modest, driven not by self-glory but selfless service, an ideal for all citizens. At the far end of the congregation, a man raised his hand and waved it frantically while shouting a contradiction. It's okay, you can mention my name." And even when told to shut up by those around him, he continued, I am here, you can reveal my identity." He was too far back to be heard on the platform, but he was near some policemen, and one of them asked him, "What is your name?" "Kanyuru John Kanyuru." The man said, "And I am the teacher the speaker is referring to." "Turn your pockets inside out," the police officer ordered him, after he made sure that Kanyuru was not carrying a weapon. The police officer, pointing at his own gun, asked him, "Do you see this? If you continue disrupting the meeting, as sure as my name is Askari Arigaigai Gatere and my inspector Wonderful Tumbo, I will relieve you of that nose." The man, Kanyuru, sat back. Not many people noticed this little commotion because all their eyes and ears were riveted on the bigger drama on the platform. The whole country, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was saying, the entire Aburirian populace had decided unanimously to erect a building such as had never been attempted in their history except once by the children of Israel, and even they had failed miserably to complete the house of Babel. Aburiria would now do what the Israelites could not do, raise a building to the very gates of heaven, so that the ruler could call on God daily to say good morning or good evening, or simply, "How was your day today, God?" The ruler would be the daily recipient of God's advice, resulting in rapid growth of Aburiria to heights never before dreamt by humans. The entire project, Heaven Scrape, or simply Marching to Heaven, would be run by a national building committee, the chair of which would be announced in good time. As these wonderful ideas had come from the birthday gift committee, Machokali went on to say he would like to acknowledge their good work by introducing each of them to the ruler. The committee members were mostly parliamentarians, but there were 2 or 3 private citizens, one of whom, Titus Tachirika, almost fell to the ground as he jumped up when his name was called out. Tachirika had never shaken hands with the ruler, and the thought that this was actually happening in front of thousands was so overwhelming that his whole body trembled in sheer wonderment at his good fortune. Even when he returned to his seat, Tachirika kept looking at his hands in disbelief, wondering what he could do to avoid using his right hand to shake hands with others, or to avoid washing it for some time. He detested gloves, but now he wished he had some in his pockets. He would certainly rectify this, but in the meantime, he would wrap the lucky hand with his handkerchief, so that when he shook hands with his left, people would assume that it was because of an injury to the other. Tachirika was so absorbed in bandaging his right hand that he missed some of the story of marching to heaven. But now he tried to catch up with Machokali's narrative. Minister Machokali was waxing ecstatic about the state and the benefits of the project, and how all these benefits would trickle down to all citizens. Once the project was completed, no historian would ever again talk about any other wonders in the world, for the fame of this modern house of Babel would dwarf the hanging gardens of Babylon, the Egyptian pyramids, the Aztecan Tenochtitlan, or the Great Wall of China. And who would ever talk of the Taj Mahal? Our project will be the first and only super wonder in the history of the world. In short, Machokali declared, marching to heaven was the special birthday cake the citizens had decided to bake for their one and only leader, the eternal ruler of the Free Republic of Aburiria. Here, Machokali paused dramatically to allow time for an ovation.